Welcome to Season 3 of Public Health on Call, a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. I'm Josh Sharfstein, Vice Dean for Public Health Practice and Community Engagement and a former Secretary of Maryland's Health Department. Our goal is to bring scientific evidence and experience to the public health news of the day through informative interviews with scientists, community leaders, policy experts, public health officials, clinicians, and more. If you have ideas or questions for us to cover, please email us at publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Smith Rogers, the producer of Public Health on Call. Today, Stephanie Desmond talks to Kausar Talat, who led one of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine trials in adults, about when vaccines will be approved for children, a crucial population if the United States is going to reach population-level immunity. Let's listen. Kausar Talat, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for having me today.
So today I want to talk about vaccine. I know that you have been involved in vaccine trials for the Pfizer vaccine for adults. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about children. So one of the groups that's absolutely not eligible is our children. And so I wonder if you could explain to me why children are not eligible at this time.
So the first thing is to look at the what's happened with the disease in all over the world. And the people who are most vulnerable to severe disease from COVID have been adults, especially older adults and adults with pre-existing conditions. And so it was really important to get vaccines out as quickly as possible for that population. And we've managed to get 2 vaccines authorized in less than a year and a third on its way. And so that's absolutely incredible and fantastic. When we look at kids, they have been far less affected by the pandemic, although kids can get the COVID and they can transmit COVID. And very rarely kids can have severe disease either with COVID or the post-COVID inflammatory disease that's called multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children, or MISC. And so it would be good to prevent disease in them as well. But when we make vaccines for children, because children are a vulnerable population, we want to go a little bit slower and make sure that the vaccines are safe in adults. And then we go down stepwise in age to make sure that they're safe and likely to be effective in younger and younger children. So for the first 2 vaccines that were authorized, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, they initially did their studies in 18 and older. Pfizer started doing their vaccine safety and efficacy studies in 16 and 17-year-olds before they applied for their emergency use authorization. And so when the FDA authorized that vaccine, it was authorized down to age 16. Moderna didn't start their adolescent trial until after their authorization, and so that's lagging a little bit further behind. Both of these vaccines are now in adolescents, so they're in kids age 12 and older in clinical trials. And we should have some of those data in the next few months. And so hopefully those vaccines will be authorized or even potentially licensed in kids down to age 12 if they're found to be safe and induce a good immune response. Once these studies are completed, then we're going to go into younger children and then younger even than that. And so hopefully over the next year or so, we'll be able to do studies in younger kids, and we'll have that safety data and the immune response data so that we know that the vaccines continue to be safe as we go down into young children. We'll know what dose to use in those children and that they will mount a good immune response and be protected from this infection.
How soon could we see vaccines for adolescents?
So since the trials are ongoing right now and Pfizer has completed its enrollment, and both Pfizer and Moderna have enrolled between 2,000 and 3,000 adolescents for their studies, I would think that in the next couple of months, we might see some of the early data, and the next few months, we'll see some of the early data in that population. And so hopefully by late spring or even early summer, we might have a vaccine authorized in that for adolescents. But until we have more vaccines available, the majority of adolescents are not in the high-risk groups. And so they may not, even though the vaccines may be authorized, they may not be available for that age population until there's a lot more vaccine available.
Mm-hmm. So my daughter is 14 and we live in Baltimore, and she wanted to know if she could get enrolled in one of these trials.
Yeah, so I have a 14-year-old daughter who wanted to know the same thing. And unfortunately, we didn't do the adolescent trials here in Baltimore. They're being done elsewhere. And so we don't have vaccines for them yet, but hopefully in the next few months that the vaccines will become available for them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Do trials in children look different than they do in adults?
Yes. Children are a vulnerable population because they're not yet of the age where they can provide informed consent on their own behalf. And so they are protected by our ethics codes, the Code of Federal Regulations, and our IRBs much more carefully than adults. And so we have different rules for trials in children. If you do a vaccine trial in an adult, all you need, besides once you get your regulatory approvals to get the trial started, when you have an adult, you just you get the informed consent from that individual for their participation in the trial. But because children can't provide that informed consent, we have to get it from their parents. Sometimes it's one parent, sometimes it's all parents. And if the child is old enough, we actually ask for their assent, that they agree to participate in the trial. And we use language to explain it to them, to make sure that they understand what the trial is for, that they understand all the processes and the procedures that will occur in the trial, that they know that there's going to be blood draws. For example, we explain that it will hurt. We try to be as honest as possible, but that might feel just like a pinprick for a few seconds, and then it will get better. And so, we do things a little bit slower in children. We're more careful, and because they can't provide the consent, there's more safeguards to protect their safety.
So my 14-year-old is like the size and shape of an adult.
Yes.
How come they're not just little adults in this situation?
So in the adolescent trials, the same doses that were given in the adult trials were given in the adolescent trials for both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. So in terms of size, they are approximately the same size. My 14-year-old's a lot smaller than me, but she is a small adult size. But their immune system is a little bit more robust than the immune system of an older person, especially as we start to get older. Our immune systems get a little less reactive and less responsive. And so the side effects might be actually a little bit more, depending on the vaccine. The other thing is the immune response may be a little bit higher. And so they may not need as high of a dose depending on the vaccine. For an example, with the HPV vaccine that we give to adolescents, they have great immune responses under the age of 14, and they only need 2 doses. But once they hit 15, then the immune response is not quite as strong. And so we actually give them 3 doses. So kids are not just little adults, and we have to investigate things differently in them than we would in adults.
Given the fact that they have more robust immune systems, is it possible that an adolescent might only need 1 dose?
The immune system works by seeing something the first time, developing an immune response, developing a memory to it, and then the second dose really boosts that immune response and boosts the memory. And so while they may have a robust response to the first vaccine, it may not last as long, and it may not be as broad as the response they would have with 2 doses. I think that for most of us, if you look at the data from both of the from the vaccine studies that have been released so far, one dose is pretty protective even in adults, but the second dose does a little bit better. And that we'll probably see the same thing in children and adolescents too, that one dose is pretty protective, but you'll get a boosted response with the second dose.
So my understanding is that the reason that kids do really need to be vaccinated as part, going forward, is that without kids in the mix, we can't reach herd immunity.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
So if a virus enters a population where people don't have immunity to it, the virus can easily transmit from person to person and make people sick, as we've seen with this new coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, that causes COVID-19. And so it's entered our population. None of us had immunity to it. Lots of people got sick and lots of people have died. Mm-hmm. As more and more people are infected and develop immunity, the virus has a harder time finding people it can infect. And so therefore the transmission will go down. And once you get to a high enough level of population immunity, once you get to a high enough level of people who have immunity to that virus, then the virus can't really transmit anymore. It can't infect person to person. You can do this with natural infection, but in order to reach that level, we'd have to have so many more people get sick, so many more people end up in the hospital. And, we've just lost 500,000 Americans to this virus and many, many more people all over the world. And that's just too high of a cost. And so the best way to get that level of immunity is to vaccinate. And you need a pretty high level of people who are vaccinated, somewhere upwards of 70 to 85%. And in order to reach that, we need to vaccinate our children and our adolescents. Also, it is possible for children and adolescents, even though the disease is relatively mild in them, for them to get to become infected and spread the virus to other people. And so we don't want that to happen. And like I said, there are some children who get really severely ill with this virus, and some have even died. I think, according to the CDC's data, over 300 kids have died in the United States from COVID-19 infection, and that's way too many children to lose.
And I guess the conversation right now that I'm hearing is all the talk of schools and schools reopening. Obviously, the lion's share of those children will now be vaccinated.
Right.
But they're going to be asked to go back to school.
Yeah. And I think that's great. I think that it is absolutely possible to send kids back to school without vaccinating them, without vaccinating anybody. And you can do it safely if you adhere to very strict public health measures. And if the circulation of the virus in the community is sufficiently low. It really helps that teachers are now being vaccinated, and that is an extra layer of protection. But you still need to keep up those public health measures to keep kids safe when they're in school. My kids are going back to school, and they can't wait.
Yeah,
I can't wait. And vaccinating kids gives us just one extra layer of protection. And so I don't think that there should be any rush to vaccinate kids. Again, they are not a priority group for severe illness. But as soon as we have enough vaccine available, we should absolutely vaccinate our kids so that the schools are safer and they're safer in school.
Kausar Talat, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Public Health on Call is produced by Josh Sharfstein, Lindsay Smith-Rogers, and Stephanie Desmond. Audio production by Spencer Greer, Niall Owen McCusker, C.N. Oates, and Matthew Martin, with support from Chip Hickey. Distribution by Nick Moran. Production support from Catherine Ricardo and Neiman Outland. Social media support from Brenda Haggader, Grace Holes Fernandez, and Caroline Wong. Thank you for listening.